Oh, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My apologies for being late. The initial link was not bringing me backstage, but it was looking good as an audience member for a while. Alhamdulillah.
Very good.
So, for those who don't know me, my name is Jamil Alam Johnson, and I am president of the Prince George's County Muslim Council. In addition, I also, for my work, I work for a financial technology organization out of New York that focuses on the trading of equities as well as providing analytic data to those who are interested in investing, particularly to the broker-dealer community and other professional traders. So I'm glad to be a part of this panel. I actually focused when I was in school on international finance issues. So I'm glad to actually be a part of this and work with Brother Owais on this particular panel. So Brother Owais, you know, the point of this panel becomes the issue of, you know, can we invest in Tesla? Is it halal to invest in Tesla? So I guess the real issue is, and forgive me if I'm starting off past where you were, but I'd like to go back to, you know, the initial questions that people may have. You know, one thing that we have noted, I mean, investing, ultimately, we talk about creating wealth for a company, creating wealth for individuals. It has to do with investing, taking a certain amount of cash and putting it into something that through sales and purchase of a particular product or service can grow, building up a consumer base, whether it be a business to business consumer base or be a retail consumer base, building in something that can grow so you ultimately can create wealth. Unless you have certain types of jobs, or if you say rise up toward the top of a large company, or unless you are, you know, in the entertainment field where you can large checks at one time, it's very difficult to create wealth through, you know, just getting a regular paycheck all the time. You have to invest it in what we call appreciating assets, right? So the question for Muslims is because we may live in a capitalist society, but we know that we can't just put our capital anywhere. And what's interesting is that during this COVID-19 period where there's been a lot of job loss, but the investment in the market has been, you know, tremendous. So people are saying, well, where can I make wealth otherwise while I'm not working? And for those of us who are still working and getting a paycheck, we're saying, well, where can I invest that money? So I would ask you to start from the beginning, what are the basic criteria as a Muslim? What do you have to avoid? We have this term Islamic finance, but then we also have this term Sharia compliant financing. What is the basic issues that someone has to take a look at if they want to know, can I invest in this or can I not invest in this so that my money is halal?
Yeah, that's a good first question to go through. And, you know, the Chime, I think that's how you pronounce her name. She was asking me about whether it's halal to invest in a stock. So we went through this a little bit, but, you know, there is a body out of Bahrain called AOFI, and the guidelines that they've set up are the following. So if you have, you know, and the numbers change from time to time, but 30 to 33% debt over market cap. If your secondary revenue is less than 5% haram revenue, so that would be, let's say, interest income, some other type of income. And then, you know, is it not? It can't be a bank. It can't be insurance and tobacco and alcohol and gambling and pornography and pork selling and all of those kinds of things. So the initial thing is, you know, on the face of it, is it haram, right? What is the business doing? And then beyond that, what's going on with the financials, accounts receivable, debt, and also interest income and any other haram revenue.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's an interesting point of view. You may know that, and we've seen, like I said, that criteria set forth.
Right.
But the interesting thing is that you have companies, and some people think of halal financing or Sharia compliant financing as like, well, these Muslim companies, right? But it's not Muslim companies. One thing about Sharia compliant financing, it's not like the Salah, right? The Salah has to be done the way that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu told us to make Salah. In the case of Sharia compliant financing, it's really about not having any of those elements, like you mentioned, not having tobacco, not having this, not having too much income from Haram sources, and not having too much debt in those sources. But the interesting thing is that there are many companies, names which you probably know from running a fund, that are very common companies that Americans invest in that are Sharia compliant.
That's
so,
right.
For instance, what are some of the companies that people will know that are in your fund?
Yeah. So Apple, Google, Adobe, Pfizer, right? So those are all companies that are large companies. I mean, the way that you create a fund, as you know, Brother Jamil, maybe not everyone knows this, but the way that and the reason why you create a fund is to reduce some of the risk in your portfolio, right? And so, like, for example, when I go out there and I'll speak to doctors, I'll say, so what are you investing in? Because they all, some of them have brokerage accounts, they want to buy individual stocks, and they're buying pharmaceuticals and healthcare companies. So they're in one segment of the one sector of the economy, which means if that sector fails, if it is not doing well in a particular year, your entire portfolio is at risk. So what a mutual fund does, it says we'll take technology, healthcare, automotive, take 20 different sectors. So if a few of them are not doing well, the others might be doing well. And so that's how you create this. And so, in each of those sectors, there's going to be names of companies, to your point or to your question, that people will know what they are. Like I just mentioned, Apple and Google and so forth.
Now, here's one of the interesting parts of that. Matter of fact, there are a number of Sharia compliant indexes, right? Dow Jones had a Sharia compliant index. Right. NASDAQ at one time had a Sharia compliant index of its top 100 companies. The interesting thing with these companies that you mentioned, Apple and others that are Sharia compliant, is that they are Sharia compliant by business model, not so much religious intent, right? So the concern that one would have there as an individual investor, if you want to be an individual investor, how do you deal with the issue of, because they're Sharia compliant by business model and not by religious intent, what is Sharia compliant today is possibly not tomorrow. Yes. So what should the investor do? Right. And how should they deal with, if they're investing through you, how do you help them deal with the fact that companies may be Sharia compliant, this year, but next year they decide to invest in, they want to buy another company that'll bring them, 20% return, that is haram. Or they decide that they want to go, big into debt because they want to buy something. So how does the individual investor deal with that? And how do you deal with that on behalf of your investors? So
an individual investor, they may use some type of application or some website that they go to figure out, is a company halal or haram? On our website, for example, we list out what we purchase. So it's on there, right? So if you look at the annual report, it'll show what the companies are. So people actually look at our holdings and they might go buy them individually, but they don't realize that we're changing that on a semi-annual basis, those names, because we might have sold out of something. And the reason we know to do that is because we have analysts that are always looking at those numbers that I mentioned at the top, which are the debt numbers and what kind of business are they in, interest income and so forth. Or in the case of one of the companies that we owned internationally, they purchased a company that was producing parts to make gambling machines, right? Like they just bought that company and part of their business was that. So then you have to analyze whether you can hold them. We have sold Amazon many years ago, even though we loved the company at the time and probably would still. because they started to sell alcohol on their website. We sold Target stores because they started to make a business out of selling alcohol. And we did the same thing with Bed Bath & Beyond. And like the company that purchased another company with these, the machines, for gambling, we sold that as well. So what we're doing is on a monthly basis, we're evaluating based on those factors, and then we have to make decisions to sell. And then finally, we have an outside company that looks at our holdings every quarter. They're based out of Malaysia, and they're called Amani Advisors. So we send them the portfolio of all four of our funds, and they have to review it and give us any feedback or sign off on it.
So let me ask you something. Do you provide, for those who invest in your fund, I'm going to ask you two things. One is, do you recommend that people who are seeking in halal investments in the market, that they stick with a fund because you have people with expertise who have the ability and whose job it is to monitor this, or that they do something like look at your funds, look at Azad funds and say, well, they're invested in these, so I'm going to go with these, realizing that you better be checking on them every now and then to see if that company is still in the fund. Which do you think would be wisest for the investor without asking you to make an investment advisor advice, just as a Muslim brother who knows this, who's offering a thought to those who are listening? Let me say this. Any answers that he gives does not make him your investment advisor.
Exactly.
One of the things they have on the commercials.
That's right. That's right. So, I do work for the Amana Mutual Fund. So I don't want to make this self-serving, though. It's really just an educational talk. But why would you choose Amana Mutual Funds versus individual stock buying? Because you have people that are looking at your portfolio on a daily basis. They're going to buy and sell the funds the stocks that they need to. They're not going to sell as often as you are, where you're not taking the gains of the companies that you purchase individually. They're properly allocating and diversifying, right? So there's a number of factors. Now, what you will find is, when the pandemic hit, the market was down over 20%. And individual stock buyers, they were down probably 50%. And that's because, again, tech people are all in tech. Doctors are all in pharmaceutical companies, right? They buy what they believe. And then the other thing is, people are buying things that are not of quality because they're hoping, they're wishing, they're not investing, they're hoping and wishing that their $5 company will go to $100 so they can finally pay off their house and live in some type of less stress, right? This is the thought process that goes through. So what you should do as an individual investor, the first thing that you have to do is you have to say, look, if I really need to buy individual companies, let me put 10% of my money to do that in a brokerage account, and 90% of my money needs to be properly managed, and it needs to be done in a way that is professional, right? Otherwise, what you're going to end up having is a failure of meeting your financial goals, and you're going to have losses that you did not expect, did not want. So the first start that you have to take into account is come up with what your financial goals are. Retirement, college education for your children, buying your first home, emergency savings, things like that. And then you figure out, what is my timeline? How many years do I have until retirement, college education, etc.? How much do I want? Do I want $1 million during retirement? Do I want $100,000 for my child's education, etc.? And then you simply back into the number, how much you need to save on a monthly basis. So this is slow, it's boring, it's methodical, it's deliberate, but it gets you to the promised land if you follow a process and you actually have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're going to get somewhere. We just don't know where that's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. As a matter of funds, obviously you have advisors like you mentioned that can say, this is acceptable, that's not acceptable, who keeps a format. But, worldwide, there are a number of scholars. You mentioned Aofi out of Bahrain, and Bahrain and Malaysia have been known as two places who've been the most progressive on the issue of, and I say progressive in developing both, knowledge base and investment issues and related to Sharia compliant investing. But there are, various scholars around the world who deal with this issue, and some, just like anything else, are more conservative than others. How does Amana deal in its funds with this issue of, some scholars saying that this way is acceptable, other scholars saying this way is not acceptable?
So it's pretty much the mainstream concept of between 30 and 33% debt levels and 5% haram revenues, and between 33 and 45% accounts receivable. So there's not too much difference there in terms of an overall, view of this. But you have to remember, we started back in 1986 when there was no AOFI. There were hardly any scholars that even realized that there is investing for Muslims, right? It was just like a free for all. Just like if you look at maybe 10 years ago, if you went to your local imam and asked them, how should I go buy my house? They'll say, what do you mean? Like, go to Wells Fargo and go buy your house, right? Try to pay it off as soon as possible, but you should own it instead of renting it. But now they would have a different answer for you because there's more knowledge in the space. So it's the same thing. So we had to start up our own processes, and eventually we got the Fiqh Council of North America to assist us. And it turns out everyone kind of built around that over time. And, the numbers are very similar to everyone else. Fortunately not.
So, another question for you. What do you think? And this may be just your thought. I never want to put somebody, especially when we're asking about things which are halal, haram, to ask them to go above their knowledge base. So your knowledge base may be way up there, Allahu Alam, and hopefully it is. But if not, even some of the great scholars would say, if they were asked a question which they weren't clear on, to say, I don't know is an answer. Right. One of the things that we deal with, like you talked about, the interesting thing of people saying, well, Sheikh, what do I do to buy a home? And depending upon that particular person's knowledge, they might say whatever they say. And they look at the individual circumstance, particularly if people in the United States or other countries where there is not a solid, you might say, Sharia compliant financial services sector. So it's like, here's what you can do. So one of the things that we're dealing with is on the business side. Those Muslims who have businesses and are saying, look, I need working capital to run my business. I need cash to buy equipment, inventory. It may be time for me to buy a building instead of just like with the house. I keep renting, putting that out. I could make more money if I bought a building. And where we have mutual funds, we have mortgage opportunities. We have ETFs now, but the working capital issue for businesses still seems to be most failing. What would your recommendation or advice be to the Muslim business community about where to get capital for their businesses?
So there are some companies that will do some business financing, few and far between. But I think, what I've seen out there is the companies that are a little bit larger, they will work with their own bank and provide that, because I've seen this myself with a couple of people that I know. They'll work with their bank and tell them that they want to do something based on Islamic principles, and here's how we do it. Will you be able to do this or not? And they create something with that bank just for them. But, probably in that situation, the financing is a little bit more valuable to that company, to that bank. So they're willing to do it. If you're looking for $100,000, they probably won't do it because it takes effort for them to try to, listen to what your wishes are. So when you really want it, you figure out a way to do it. The other way to do it is to get an investor. Somebody has the money, and you're basically giving them some of the profit, right? If you want to give away some of your business and raise some funds that way, that's another way to do it. But this is a space where there is more need in the United States for Muslims to have this opportunity, just like with student loans and with car loans and other kinds of loans that people need. The accessibility is not there.
Forgive me, I hope I'm not pronouncing your name wrong. Sister Shimei, is there anything here where you wanted to jump in
Yes.
to the conversation, or questions that you can also, that you'd like to put to Brother Owais?
Yeah. I have a question, because some people think that, yes, you have invested and then you want more money, but you didn't do an effort really. you just had money and then you have more money at the end. And how is that Islamic, really?
Right. So, Shimei, let's say that you have, just like to Brother Jamil's point before, let's say you have a kebab restaurant, all right?
Mhm.
And it's doing well, but you're making money every month. But you want to buy a second store because you really need to put this store where other people are asking you for it, and it's 30 miles away or 30 minutes away, but you don't have the money for it. So you ask Brother Jamil, hey, would you like to put half of the money into this place for me? And I'm going to run it, but you put in half the money. And so you're going to be half owner. Is he doing work on a regular basis? Maybe he's advising you on some things, but is he doing the actual work? No, he's not. He's not doing the work, but he supplied you with that money. It's the same concept if you're buying a kebab restaurant or have Brother Jamil, invest some money in your kebab restaurant to expand it or whatever. As you're buying Apple, it's the same thing, right? You're buying a portion of that company. Very, very much a similar situation. It just happens to be in a private concept versus a public concept.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the real issue here is that it is acceptable. And I always no, I was saying it's acceptable, and I always get the terms mixed up as much as I've been studying this, whether it be musharaka, where one person is providing capital, and the other person is providing the work. So let's say, for instance, that I want to rehab homes, but I'm not a contractor, but I have a certain amount of cash. So I partner with a friend who is a contractor, and we say, okay, the home is, the home needs to be fixed up. We can buy it for $100,000, and it will take another $30,000 to make it available to put on the market. I will come up with the majority of the money. I come up with the majority of the money. Maybe I come up with 100,000. He comes up with the 30. He does the work, and we split the profits because we decide that his work is worth another $70,000 of labor. And in the end, we sell the house maybe for $300,000, and we split the $150,000. Each of us making a profit. That is acceptable in Islam. The issue, as we know, is that money in itself does not grow just over the passage of time. There must be some appreciation. So the issue in this case is the money that we made was not just on me putting it in. Let's say it took him 4 months to fix up the home. I don't get more money because of the fact that 4 months passed. I get more money because the home has been fixed up. So the value of it is higher to a buyer now. And that's where my investment appreciated, as opposed to, I'm going to loan you the $100,000 to help fix up the house. And no matter what happens to a house, good, bad, or others, you owe me 10% of that $100,000 at the end of the year. So you have to pay me $110,000, even though the house didn't get fixed up. There was a hurricane that kept it from going forward, or whatever the case may be. But you still owe me the money because time has passed, and you had the time over a period of time.
The other thing that you might be alluding to, Chimay, is, or your question can naturally go to is, you're talking about an average return. Let's say you'll talk to me and say, hey, what's the return of one of your funds? And I tell you it's 7% or it's 10%. The question that'll come up when people are first starting to invest is, how can you give me 7%? Isn't that interest? Right? That's another question that comes up. How are you getting a 7% return? Well, in the case of what Brother Jamil just said, if he put in $200,000 and the contractor worked on that house and they sold it for $300,000, I will tell you he had a 50% return, okay, on the initial investment, not counting all the parts and labor and all that. I'm just saying strictly on the $200,000 to $300,000, there was a 50% increase. Is that halal or haram? That's halal, right? Because it's a 50% return, not interest. It's the value of something going up. It's the same thing with when you're buying stocks or mutual funds that own stocks.
Yeah. Another way to look at that for our audience is that sometimes it actually is a appreciation can be based on things like revenue growth, for instance, can create appreciation. But it can also be things like demand, right? So many stocks go up in value or down in value, not because of what it actually is happening with the company, but what's happening is what people think is happening with the company or is going to happen with the company. So if I invest in a particular company and, you know, they say, we have this idea of what we're going to do, and people think that, well, I think this is going to take off, so I'm willing to pay more to invest, to have ownership of shares of that company. My investment can go up just based on that. I mean, a perfect example has been what's been happening with this COVID situation. You take a company like Best Buy, which, as I have seen, does come under one that is Sharia compliant, of course, according to one company that was invested in it. Their 12-month high was, say, $90 a share. But in April, after the economy, that went down to $44 a share. That was $44 a share at one point. Either 44 or 48. And a lot of that was because, well, they're closed, they can't sell. So people thought the economy is bad, they're going to have a bad situation, the price is going to go down. But as, you know, they were to open back up again, and people thought, oh, things are going to get better, the stock shot right back up. So a lot of it is, and that's also halal in a sense of making a return with the passage of time, just because the demand for something, you know, a basic economics, you know, the supply stays the same, but the demand grows up, the price goes up. And this is also unacceptable.
The same thing that can be said about real estate, for example. So what happened was in Vancouver, there was a lot of Chinese buyers with cash. And so Vancouver said, we're no longer going to allow it with this sway. You have to pay like 30% extra or something. So what started happening was that the state in America that was closest to it is Washington. So homes over there, especially in Seattle, start to rise again with the hope or the expectation that Chinese buyers were going to start buying homes there before they even started buying homes there, right? Or in the case of in Dallas, where you have some tech companies going out there, if you have an investment home, you're not going to sell that for $200,000 anymore because Tesla is about to get there, and then another Oracle is about to get there, etc. So you're going to wait, and you're going to now charge $300,000 for that same home or something else. So, you know, it's the expectation that something that's going to happen, same thing that would happen in the stock. Anyway, Chimay, did you have any other questions?
Yeah. Well, speaking of the stock market, a lot of people think that the idea of the stock market isn't good because the stock market is all about expectations, about what, for example, those people who thought that those houses would gain more value because Chinese people will buy them. That's why their value went up. So people think that the stock market, it's like a multiplication on wishes and hopes, and we can't really invest in its hard-earned money. You know, people invest their retirement money on stock markets. So yeah, that's my question. Sure. Some people think that the stock market isn't a good institution, really.
Okay. I mean, I think you can look at it in different ways. You can look at it, let's put it this way. So if you have Facebook, you can use it in the right way or the wrong way, or TikTok or Instagram or whatever it happens to be. There's nonprofits that use these social media and get the word out about their, the orphans in some country that need assistance. And so you're getting the word out there, and that's a positive thing. The stock market can also be thought of in the same way, that if you're going out there and saying, I want to buy every penny stock, right? Stocks that are under $5. I want to go buy this dollar company and this one that's $1.50. And you're just taking a gamble, really. You're not investing. But if you're looking at the financials of the company, you're seeing that, there's still value there before you purchase it. this is where you're investing. So you just have to make you have to be deliberate about it. And there is risk. Certainly there's going to be risk because there's thousands of listings of companies there. Many of them are going to go bankrupt tomorrow, right? So you have to know what you're doing, be educated, or have somebody help you to do
it. And let me just jump in and use a slightly different term than Brother Owais used. He used the term, it's a gamble.
That's right.
But we know gambling in itself is haram.
Yeah.
But you know, just to return it, what he's really saying is there's a risk. And risk is a part of investment, and it's acceptable in Islam. And investing in anything, whether you're going to manage it yourself, you know, there are people, Muslims and everybody else, because this is an issue of this is what we do to make money, who open up a business, they have worked, maybe they've gotten money from friends and family, and they've invested it in a business. Sometimes it could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions. And it doesn't work out for one reason or another. And that money is lost. It's a risk. But like they say, right, no risk, no reward, right? So the issue of saying, well, I put my money in some stocks and it went down, that doesn't make it haram. That means it's a risk. You know, there are people who have put their money into, you know, flipping a home, or trying to even be a landlord and then end up with a bad tenant and then end up costing more than they gained. It's a risk, but you know, risk is acceptable in Islam as long as it just comes under, the investment is done under certain principles. We are getting I've seen some questions on the chat. Let me take a quick
look at them. Let me just clarify the piece about gambling. So I'm not talking about stocks that are, you know, that you're looking at in a way that's educated and you're looking at financials. I was talking specifically about those penny stocks. You have no idea what their financials are. You don't even know what they do. Somebody on some message board said, buy this PXYTX stock, and you decided to do it, and it was 42 cents. That's a gamble. That is not an investment, right? You're treating it, your intention is to treat it like a gamble instead of an investment. I want this 42 cents share to go up to $3 so I can make this much money on it, but you haven't done anything on it and you're getting it from a message board. That's gambling. That's right. Yeah. But anyway, please, if there's any questions on the chat group, we'll be happy to take them.
Well, for instance, one question says, how can Muslims invest in a way that's halal? I mean, we've talked about, that's what we've been talking about the whole conversation. But it says, is there a Muslim version of Webull, Robinhood, or even Cash App?
Well, so if you have there's a lot of echo. But anyway, so if you have an app, for example, that allows you to buy for $10 at a time, and that's what you like about it, you're able to buy over time and, you know, invest small amounts of money. That's good. There's already things like that now, right? If you have a mutual fund and you want to buy $10 at a time, you can do the same thing there. So, but you know, I think the thing about having an app and having, you know, slightly different way of investing or buying individual securities, that is what people want to see, right? And they're not looking necessarily only at mutual funds. They're talking about the individual stocks that they want to buy. That might not be there right now, but what is there is there's apps that you can go in and say, is BBY halal or haram? And it'll tell you whether it's questionable, halal, haram. Then you can go to your Robinhood or whichever app you want to use, and you can go buy BBY, no problem. You don't have to make that a halal version of it, but the integration of having that, you know, going to the first app and then going to the second app, if you put that all in one, that could be a winning solution potentially.
I think that's actually a point that you just made, because many times people will say something like, you know, is there a Muslim version of it? Well, a Muslim is a human being, right? Who may do things that are good, bad, or otherwise, and so on and so forth. The issue really is what is Sharia compliant and what is not, right? So you can use E-Trade to buy stocks. You don't need, you know, the Muslims to develop an E-Trade
That's right.
to say that buying the stock is halal. Now, if there is an E-Trade or a broker-dealer, say an online broker-dealer or a individual broker-dealer who happens to be Muslim, and you want to give him your business, alhamdulillah, to strengthen the community. But the issue is using any of those platforms to make is halal. So like the brother said, there may be some apps that can tell you if it is or it isn't. Do you know the names of any of those apps in case people want to?
Well, I'm not trying to advertise for anyone, but I mean, there's one that I was just using when you mentioned Best Buy, and that's Zoya, Zoya. So that one can be used.
Yeah, and just to make it clear, like the brother said, for anybody who's listening, he is not here endorsing any particular product or something like that. Somebody asked, you know, the name of one, but you have to check it out on your own. This is not an endorsement from Amana or the organizers of this forum or anything to that effect. But I'm sure, you know, all of us know how to use Google. So if you want to say, you know, type in, you know, apps for halal investing, you know, these things will come up.
Yes.
So let me see if there are others. You know, what are your thoughts also on things like, for instance, many people have already purchased their homes and they've gotten, say, an original case, say from the FIC Council of North America saying, well, you know, we need to buy homes and so on and so forth. And there's always that debate about, no, what you need is a place to live. So you can rent that versus, you know, buying a home and having an investment. But let's say you've already bought it and you bought it with, you know, Bank of America, whoever the case may be. And you say, look, I want to get out of this. And I want to get into something that's Sharia compliant. You know, what do you recommend?
What I would recommend is trying to clean up our finances completely, right? So what we do, like what I talk about sometimes when I'm making a presentation on retirement or whatnot, is look, people are trying to get to 5 daily prayers. We're trying to fast all days of Ramadan. We're trying to go to Hajj and make sure we take care of that obligation. And all of the other things we're supposed to be doing, right, as Muslims. But then what happens is at your death, you don't have a will or a trust, and according to Islamic rules, you're supposed to give your money in a schedule, right? It's going to go to wife, children, parents, etc. But what ends up happening is all of it goes to a spouse because you did not take your finances in a holistic view. You looked at it only as I'm earning my money halal and I'm spending it halal. But what about the money you have in your 401k? What about the money you have in a 529 plan, right? Those things are not necessarily going to be in the right place. So what you should do is you should look at where your money is put, what you're earning. Like, for example, my money is I have some money in a savings account, emergency funds, and I asked the bank to let me sign off on not receiving the interest. I don't want the interest. Some people will say, take the interest and give it away. Fine, go do that. But I'm saying I don't want the interest at all, period. I don't want it. So I'm not receiving the interest there. The other money that's invested, it has to be in an Islamic way. If I'm going to have a home financing, I can go refinance that and get that at a Muslim-run provider and get it. So now I'm going to feel like at least my intention was to clean up my act, and I've went and done that. If I know about something that I need to do, like if I need to have a will before I die, and if I don't do that, that's on me. Like that's trouble for me because I did not follow the rules of engagement in our deen.
And Sister Shemay, please jump in if you have any other questions or thoughts that come out as we're conversing. It's good to have an open conversation. But Brother Owais, you brought up something twice in this conversation that I think a lot of people don't think of and don't even consider there's something that they can do.
Right.
Both in regards to business and what you just said about yourself in regards to receiving interest on your account. We're so used to being, it's like, for instance, when you go to the souk, and I say the souk in this point, you know, I mean, obviously that refers to the whole marketplace as a whole. Right. But we often refer to the souk in regards to going to buying, you know, consumer goods overseas, right? Right. And you go there and, you know, they negotiate and you're expected to negotiate. Matter of fact, the first time I went to a Muslim country was Al Maghrib, you know, Morocco, back in like 99. And the brother who was our guy, who was from there, you're from Morocco?
Yeah.
The brother who was our guide, I had a great time there, by the way. Took us to the souk, and he said, we'll help you negotiate. He said, they expect you to negotiate.
Right.
And so, but, when we go into a store here, there's a price marked on it, and that's basically the price, unless we're buying something big.
Yeah.
But you talked about the issue of going to the bank and saying, hey, wait a minute, here's what I want. Mm-hmm. Can you do this or not do this? And they can say yes or no.
Right.
And like you said, the better a customer that you are, or the more it benefits the bank. I mean, obviously the bank is loving the fact that the interest that they're gaining on investing your money that's in your account, their profit is based on how much interest they have to pay you, right? So they're charging, maybe they're lending out your money at, depending on, let's say if it's a mortgage, today's mortgages with the rates are very, very low. But let's say, just to throw out a number, let's say they're making 4% on the mortgage, and they're giving you, 1.5%. So their profit is 2.5% minus their expenses. But in your case, you're saying, no, keep 100% of your interest profit. I don't want any of it.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't they say yes?
Right.
And you don't now have to deal with the issue of giving away the interest.
Right.
Because sometimes as we're going about our daily lives, we may forget to go back, look at the interest that we earned and give it away. And now we have this haram in our account. You've avoided that by saying, astaghfirullah, I don't even want it.
Right.
You keep it.
So
that's not something that you have to deal with. Now, in another side, on the business side, you may have an issue with the business, depending upon how good the business is, how much money they offer the bank. Then the bank might be willing to say, hey, we want to keep your business. So how can we negotiate the kind of financing that you need? Is it big enough? And do you have enough of our products that makes it worthwhile? Or like I looked at with some brothers, and we're still working on it, getting a bunch of businesses together and saying, hey, this is what we need as businesses and consumers. Are you willing to offer this thing if we all go with you? So this one may have only $1 million, but all together, it may be a $20 million deposit, working capital, and so on and so forth that the bank needs. Yeah. So that's something when we look at from a community point of view, until we can get Sharia compliant banks, that we can say, hey, how can we move a bank toward Sharia compliance by offering them a large enough amount of business? Sister Shemaine, did you have anything you wanted to ask at this time? And we also have some more questions in the chat.
I was just wanted to make a point. For example, just speaking about the stock market. For example, we have a company. You have a company, and then a bad rumor passes about that company, which is false. And tomorrow, that company loses all its capital, for example. And that may be a case. Maybe that happened. And it makes me question the institution of the stock market, really. And it makes me really say, why should we invest on these stocks and consider it as a legitimate institution, really, where people can get ripped off while they're working so hard and they're ethical and etc. Because
yeah, I mean, look, I think you have a few questions that are more detailed that we probably need to have you speak to someone and have back and forth for a while. But, one thing to look at is if you are buying that one company and you happen to have bad luck with it, that goes back to my point. Only use 10% of your money to do it yourself. But if you have a company, there's a rumor that takes place that, this soda company is employing people and abusing them, and so the stock tanks and doesn't recover. If you have 34 other companies in that fund that you own, you haven't really done that poorly, right? Yes, it affected your return a little bit, but the other companies are doing it. So what you're doing is you're risk mitigating. You're not keeping all of your money in 1, 2, 3, 5 or 10 stocks that you don't know how to manage, you don't know what to even look at, right? To continue to educate yourself about those companies and stay, understanding of what's going on with it. So I think you can mitigate your risk, like if those kinds of issues that you have on your mind, because it's not happening to every company that there's a rumor and all of a sudden it may happen to one company and then another company. It's not happening to all of them at one time. So you can mitigate that risk, inshallah.
And I think one of the things, as the brother was offering, is the issue of having a diversified portfolio, right? So you don't lose everything at once. But here's a little behind the scenes thing on the point that you're making that most people don't know. Most companies, now this may not be true for the pink sheets, but companies, and those are really low level, what they call over-the-counter traded stocks. But companies that are listed on a national exchange, the national exchanges as regulators have a responsibility to surveil what's happening in the market in a real-time basis. So they're basically watching trades as they take place. That includes getting information about the market that may be taking place in the news, on Twitter, on Facebook. It means having electronic feeds that are coming into them about the stocks that are listed on their exchange. So for instance, sometimes what you're talking about, someone will do as a part of trying to game the market. So they'll put out a rumor about a company, and it could be a rumor that goes either way. It could be a rumor that's going to lower the price, like what you were saying, so that they can go in and buy at a low price. And when the rumor dissipates, the price goes back up and they've made money. This is illegal. It's also illegal if you do it the other way around. When you pass a rumor that says something really great is going to happen to the stock that you've made up, you've already bought. In this case, you would have bought the stock ahead of time, then floated the rumor. As the price goes up, you then sell at a profit. And then as the rumor dissipates, when people find out it's not true, because the company is going to react. And then before the price drops, you've already sold. This is illegal. But also the companies, the exchanges, when this kind of thing happens, when you talk about what you call market moving news, the companies have, the exchanges have the right to actually stop the trading of the stock. So they can halt the trading so that it doesn't drop dramatically or doesn't rise dramatically. And matter of fact, if certain things happen in the market that cause the price to rise or drop automatically, it could be real news. There are something called tickers. There's what they call limit up, limit down, that will literally stop that particular stock from trading automatically until the rumors can be, or whatever the news is, can be properly disseminated, and people are making rational decisions versus irrational decisions. I do want to ask another question to Brother Uwais from the chat, and it says, is Sharia compliant business, he calls it Islamic economics, sustainable in a capitalistic system such as America? So we have one of those is Islam compatible in America type of questions.
Yeah. Well, so, once you talk to the regulators and you explain what it is that you're trying to do, after some time, they understand and say, okay, we just need to be able to equate this to something that we already know, right? So if we already know that there's going to be interest income, okay, we can equate that to profit. All right, that's good. So we can do a partnership agreement instead of a straight loan. So if you can demonstrate something like that, it can work. Now, is it sustainable to give loans to people at 0% interest out of the kindness of your heart and not receive anything back and be able to build a business? No, that's not going to be compatible with, the capitalistic system that we work in. But if there's a way to demonstrate that there's something that's similar or equal in some ways in their eyes, then you can make it work. But I think this question is actually a much larger question than what I might be addressing. And that's like a whole philosophical conversation as well. But it's a good question.
Sister Chimay, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, it's about capitalism, really. Well, capitalism, I think, can't be compatible with the Sharia, really, because it is a riba-based system, really. So I think we make a lot of trade-offs just to have those Islamic banks, if you know what I mean.
So yeah, and I think I see where you're heading with that. But within a capitalistic society, can you have your own way of doing things? That's what I'm addressing. I'm not addressing the larger question here. It's sort of like if you go to court and you say, look, according to our wishes, we'd like this to happen, right? Like, for example, I want my will to be split up according to Islamic principles. We're living in a U.S. system. We're living in a judicial system that's a U.S. system. It's not an Islamic system, but they allow you to do that, right? They don't mandate that you give it all to your wife or to your wife and your children. They can allow that. So it's the same thing. There's ways to have acceptance on certain things. You just need to demonstrate it, but it's not going to change the entire system. And you may need to make some trade-offs, and those are unfortunate. And hopefully we don't have to make those in most cases.
I think that's an excellent point, because what we're really looking at many times is facilitating our way of life as Muslims, right? So the larger system may not be run based on what we believe, but under the law, can we create a subset system, a niche system that meets our particular needs as Muslims, right? So for instance, you have a certain way that people are typically buried in the United States, right? You go to the undertaker. He takes the body, they embalm it, and so on and so forth. They want to charge you such and such amount for the casket, and this and that, and so on and so forth, right? But we have Muslim funeral services here that can be licensed, that can claim the body, clean it, and wrap it in the way that we do it, and bury it with the head facing the Qibla as the way we do it, so you can still manage your life. I think one of the bigger questions related to that, when it comes to the accumulation of capital that can then be invested in many both business and consumer products.
Was it not the same?
The issue of banking.
Does it save it?
Excuse me, Sister Malia, can you go on mute? Is the issue of banking and dealing with banking, trying to set up a Sharia compliant bank, which means not interest, which is what the regulators are used to, how the regulators would deal with FDIC insurance, which is kind of a hard thing, and saying we want a Sharia compliant bank that doesn't meet with what they are used to in banking regulation, and how we're able to work that in. And it may be a situation of, can we, under the current laws, develop a Sharia compliant bank? And the problem sometimes that we have is, if you use the word bank, there are certain things that we, even as Muslim consumers, are expecting that may not be consistent with Islamic law. So the question becomes, do we need to change national policy or state policy if it's going to be a state licensed bank versus national policy if it's going to be a national bank that's regulated by the Office of the Control of the Currency or Federal Reserve? Brother Ways, what is your thought on that one issue of establishing a bank so we can accumulate capital from many people, invest it where it needs to be, yet dealing with the current regulatory system of the United States?
So I'm part of the Islamic Sharia Council of California, and I'm the chairman, and we were approached by a gentleman in Virginia who would like to have us create a credit union. Mm-hmm. And actually, the first place they went to was New Jersey. And in New Jersey, they're a little bit ahead of us compared to Southern California. So they asked me to join the board of that credit union in New Jersey, and it's developing an Islamic way to start a credit union. And the regulators are actually working with us to do that. So once that one is up and running, then the second one in Southern California should be up and running. And I have no doubt that this gentleman that's helping us to do that will get them organized in different parts of the country. So there is a movement on that. You know, I know we're getting closer to our time. I just want to, if you don't mind, Brother Jamil, give 3 of my thoughts of what people can take away and do for themselves today. And then
please. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one is, you know, going back, because it's been a good long conversation here, is set your financial goals and then figure out a way to how to accomplish them Islamically. Think about your will and trust. If you're young, maybe you just need a will. If you have a lot of assets and different kinds of assets, you may need a trust. And this also helps you in the case of incapacity, in the case of death of both parents. So please look at that as well. Any Muslim that has something to give cannot travel more than 2 days without having a will. Okay, and most people don't know this, but once we say it, then people start looking into getting wills. And the third thing I would mention, because it's highly actionable, is if you have an employer, if you're working somewhere, ask them whether they have a brokerage option within their 401k, so you don't have to pick their mutual funds. Instead, you can start up the brokerage account, which will remain in the 401k, and then you can buy what you would like to buy. For example, you know, the company I work for, as I mentioned, Amana Mutual Funds, or individual stocks, which you have to be very careful about. So those are 3 things that I think you can do today, and you will have more success if you try to have some goals versus not having the goals. So setting goals, will and trust, and then try to work on a brokerage account within your 401k.
And you know something, Brother Ways? One of the things that we're looking at in Prince George's County that we need to set a better agenda for. We didn't have success in the last county administration, is that the county of Prince George's, when it comes to retirement counts, does allow now for what they call a self-directed account. So you can say, I want my money to go here instead of there. What we need to get to the point is letting letting the entire Prince George's County community, or particularly the Muslim community, know that if you work for the county, you can do this, and you can bring in, you know, an amana, an azad, whoever it is that you want to bring in, the direct, so you can try to make sure that your retirement is halal. And I think what we need to move on from a policy point of view, I'm a policy person, is, and again, it becomes that niche, that kind of sub community of saying, well, how can we live our lives, of saying, you know, we can invest more money in the amana if we have, say, a state policy that says that all retirement funds must have, say, a self-directed portion of it, that all 529s, you know, need to have that. Because many times we want to take advantage of what the society is offering in savings and investment. It's like, well, you have to go here, you have to go there. And we have a political disadvantage, because certainly, you know, your big players are going to say, wait a minute, I got the contract with the state to offer the retirement account. You know, and I'm not going to name the companies because sometimes I have to work with them in real life, but it doesn't matter. I have the contract. I don't want that. But that's where our political acumen has to come in place. And sometimes people think, you know, Muslims shouldn't be involved in politics, but policy is what helps you facilitate your way of life. And if you stay away from it, you're not going to be able to make the kind of change that you need in order to say, I want my money directed to Amana. I want my money directed to Azad, or whoever else is out there. And the benefit of that is that if you grow, then you can also do more things for the Muslim community too, on a charitable basis or wherever else the case may be. You can hire more people from the community, and that strengthens us economically. And the last thing I want to say is that issue you mentioned of the credit union being organized in Jersey. Once that happens, I want to hear about it, so I can see if we can do the same thing here in Prince George's County.
Inshallah. Inshallah. That should be a goal for us to do everywhere. So, but what that also tells us, though, is that the Muslims are going to need to participate. You there's a lot of questions that you might have that are cynical, or I don't know about this, so it can't be okay. You need to do a little bit more studying, just because we need you involved, right? We need you to get to that point where you understand it. So if there is a credit union in New Jersey next month, which it won't be that soon, but next month, that you'll participate. Why do we need you to participate? Because if you give your money to it, then it can be lent out in an Islamic way. If you don't give your money to it, there's nothing to be lent out, right? So if we create things, but then people don't participate, like you said, that we're not going to be able to hire as many people. And I can tell you this, when we have a position come up, there's many people that want to go for the position because they're working at a large bank or large, investment company, and they're trying to leave the riba system, but there's not enough jobs out there in the Islamic space. So the more that we participate, the more opportunity for everybody, inshallah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say this, and I recommend it to everybody. My mortgage is with a Sharia compliant company. My children's 529, which they basically are out of using now. Well, not the 529, but I saved for I didn't go with the state, so I decided to save with a mutual fund company for that. Jobs that I have left, in which I, was able to take my 401k or 403b with me, I've went with a Sharia compliant company wherever I can put that. And I even had a Sharia compliant insurance for my home at one point in time, but they had to shut down, probably because they weren't getting enough support. So if we want to live this way of life, we have to do, like the saying says, put our money where our mouth is. So Brother Owais, thank you very much for your time, for the information. I hope that people will follow up and look at, Amana, Azad, and wherever's out there, and put our business, I always think of it from the point of view is I want to spend my money with family, right? And the believers are brothers and sisters one to another. So I recommend that for everyone, for your time. And I hope that this benefits those who are listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for everyone for attending.
Thank you.